scent of wild herbs drifted through the air. His mother, Katerina, was a peasant woman of simple means. His father, Ser Piero da Vinci, was a respected notary in the nearby town of Anciano. The two were not married, so Leonardo entered the world as an illegitimate child. Yet, from the beginning, he seemed marked by curiosity rather than circumstance. The rhythms of nature became his first teacher. The movement of clouds, the murmur of running water, the flight of birds across a pale sky. As a boy, he wandered freely through meadows and woods. He examined everything he could touch or hear or see. The shells embedded in stones fascinated him. He asked why sea creatures had left their traces so far from the ocean. He followed streams to their sources, noticing how water carved its own patterns. Every insect, every leaf, every shadow seemed a question waiting to be answered. He drew in the dirt with the sticks, and later with charcoal on scraps of paper. His father brought from the notary's office. The lines flowed effortlessly, alive with motion. Ser Piero recognized the unusual gift in his son's hand and mind. When Leonardo was about 14, his father carried some of the boy's drawings to Florence, to the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio. as an apprentice, and so, leaving behind the quiet fields of Vinci, the boy entered the bustling life of Florence, cradle his contemporaries already sensed that Leonardo possessed a vision unlike any other. By 1472, Leonardo had joined the Florentine Painters Guild, yet he remained tied to Verrocchio's studio, continuing to learn the mechanics of bronze casting and design. He painted small commissions, portraits, and devotional images, though many were left unfinished. His restlessness was both a gift and a curse. He could not confine his mind to a single pursuit. If he painted a hand, he needed to understand the sinews beneath the skin. If he sketched a bird, he wondered how air currents held it aloft. Art and science intertwined in his imagination until they became one act of observation. Among his early independent works was the delicate Annunciation, painted for a monastery near Florence. The angel kneels in a garden of meticulously rendered plants. Each blade of grass seems studied from life, yet even as admirers praised its beauty, Leonardo was already turning to anatomy, dissecting animals to trace the structure of muscles and veins. He filled pages with notes written in his peculiar mirror script, from right to left, perhaps to keep them private, or simply because his left hand found the motion easier. The notebooks reveal a mind ceaselessly reaching outward, calculating ratios, designing gears, systems. Only at the end did he add that he could also design monuments in marble and bronze in the manner of anyone who lives. The letter convinced the Duke, and Leonardo left Florence for Milan, carrying with him his instruments, sketches, and a heart eager for discovery. Milan was a city of courts and soldiers, less graceful than Florence, but rich in opportunity. Leonardo entered the service of Ludovico Sforza around 1483 and quickly became indispensable. He designed elaborate entertainments for the court, pageants where mechanical lions walked and stars revolved above painted skies. He surveyed canals and improved locks to prevent flooding. He drew plans for an ideal city with wide streets and clean water, a vision centuries ahead of its time. His art flourished as well. In those first Milanese years, he painted the Virgin of the Rocks, a work of quiet mystery, where figures gather in a grotto lit by invisible light. Every stone, plant, and shadow is studied from nature, yet composed with spiritual balance. Around 1490, he began collaborating with the mathematician Luca Pacioli on De Divina Proportione, illustrating geometric solids and exploring the harmony of proportion that governs both bodies and buildings. It was during this period that he created the drawing known as Vitruvian Man. as it pours into a basin. Another analyzes the structure of a heart valve. Another designs a machine to polish mirrors. He seemed to believe that the secret of one element could unlock the secret of all. The spiral of hair resembles the swirl of a vortex. The branching of veins echoes the roots of trees. He wrote, "Everything connects to everything else." Among his grandest projects for Ludovico was a monument to the Duke's father, Francesco Sforza, a colossal bronze horse that would surpass all previous sculpture. Leonardo studied the anatomy of horses for years, producing hundreds of sketches. By 1493, he completed a full-size clay model, more than 7 meters high. It astonished all who saw it. But before he could cast the statue, Milan's political fortunes collapsed. In 1499, French troops invaded. Ludovico fled, and the stored bronze intended for the monument was melted down for cannons. The great horse never came to life. During his Milan years, Leonardo also began work on the Last Supper, painted on the wall of the refectory of Santa Maria della Grazia. Unlike traditional fresco, tells his disciples that one will betray him. Each figure reacts differently. Astonishment, anger, sorrow, disbelief. The geometry of the room draws the eye to Christ's calm center, where silence replaces speech. Centuries later, the painting still holds that breathless tension. As the new century approached, the winds of war forced Leonardo to move again. When the French occupied Milan, he left the city with a small group of assistants, carrying notebooks, instruments, and his unfinished dreams. He wandered through Mantua and Venice, offering his services as an engineer of defense. For Venice, he designed floating barriers and rapid construction bridges to guard against invasion. Everywhere he went, rulers sought his counsel, but few provided lasting peace or payment. He survived on reputation and curiosity. By 1500, Leonardo had returned for a time to Florence. He was 48 years old, famous yet still elusive, admired but seldom understood. He spent his mornings observing the flow of the Arno River, proposing plans to divert it for navigation and flood control. He studied the movement of water with mirrors and colored dyes, watching eddies form and vanish. In those spirals, he saw the pulse of life itself. His notes words describe how water moves like blood through the veins of the earth. Florence welcomed him home as a master. Patrons requested portraits. The city council sought monumental murals, and students crowded to his side. Among them was a young engineer named Francesco Melzi, who would remain with him until death. Yet Leonardo worked at his own rhythm, slow and meditative, sometimes to the impatience of his employers. Around this time, he accepted the commission to paint the portrait of Lisa Gherardini, the wife of a wealthy merchant named Francesco del Giocondo. He began it around 1503. The world would one day know it as La Gioconda, the Mona Lisa. He painted it not for delivery, but for understanding. Layer upon layer, thin as air, he built transitions of tone so soft that the eye cannot find the border between light and shade. The smile, half joy, half thought, became the most studied expression in history. Behind her stretches a landscape of winding rivers and distant mountains, a geography of imagination. Leonardo carried this painting with him for the rest of his life, always refining, never finishing. While in Florence, he also received a grand commission from the government, a mural depicting the Battle of Anghiari, to celebrate a Florentine victory of the previous century. He conceived a furious knot of soldiers and horses, energy frozen at its peak, to achieve vivid color on a large wall. He experimented with a new mixture of oil and varnish, heated to fix the pigment, but the process failed. The upper sections artists for generations studied Leonardo's surviving sketches for their vitality. Even in disappointment, he continued to explore. He dissected human cadavers at the hospital of Santa Maria Nuova, charting every bone and muscle with scientific precision. His drawings of the heart, the fetus, and the brain remain among the most accurate of their time. He observed that the heart's valves opened and closed by vortex motion, a truth confirmed only centuries later. He wrote, "I am learning how life lives." At 50, he stood at the height of his intellect, but no nearer to rest. The notebooks of these Florentine years overflow with studies of flight, optics, mathematics, and philosophy. He pondered why the sky is blue, how sound travels, how birds control their descent. He designed a glider with a vast wingspan, its pilot prone upon a wooden frame, legs bumping to change pitch. He imagined a parachute shaped like a pyramid, its fabric catching the air to slow a fall. His pages mix numbers, poems, sketches, and observations in a language of wonder. As the 16th century opened, Italy trembled was to curiosity. As the new century unfolded, Leonardo's reputation had grown beyond Italy. Kings and dukes, scholars and soldiers all sought a piece of his genius. Yet inside, he felt the same quiet hunger to understand, the same need to see how one motion gave rise to another. Around 1506, he returned once more to Milan, now under French control. There he found a new protector in the governor, Charles d'Amboise, and again a place to work in peace. He was 54 years old. In these years, Leonardo's notebooks deepened into a vast compendium of observation. He drew the human skeleton in layers, the organs in cross-section, the muscles twisting like braided cords. Each line was both art and science, expression and inquiry. He dissected more than 30 corpses, carefully noting the structure of the heart and lungs, the mechanism of breathing, the balance of the spine. He discovered that the heart's aortic valve glows by the swirling motion of blood, an insight no one else would confirm until modern times. He wrote that the heart was not merely a muscle, but the center of life's warmth, the sun of the microcosm. By day, he consulted on engineering works for the French administration, canals, fortresses, soul is the chief means whereby the understanding may most fully and abundantly appreciate the infinite works of nature. Visitors to a studio in Milan spoke of walls covered with drawings of water swirling around obstacles, smoke rising from a candle, hair falling in curls. Everything moved, and Leonardo watched movement with infinite patience. To him, stillness was only the pause between motions. In 1508, he began a new set of anatomical studies in collaboration with a physician named Marcantonio della Torre. Together they planned a treatise that would unite art and medicine. Leonardo's drawings from this period, the human skull sliced to reveal cavities, the fetus curled within the womb, the muscular system of the shoulder and neck remain among the most precise anatomical images ever made by hand. Yet the book was never published. middle of the first decade of the 1500s, Leonardo's fame had reached the papal court in Rome. When Giuliano de' Medici, the brother of Pope Leo X, invited him to the Vatican, Leonardo accepted, hoping for quiet patronage and scientific freedom. He arrived in Rome in 1513 and took up residence in the Belvedere within the Vatican gardens. There he set up a workshop equipped with furnaces, lenses, and mechanical tools. He planned experiments with optics and chemistry. He studied the refraction of light through crystals and the blending of pigments with oils. But the atmosphere of the papal court was thick with politics and rivalry. Michelangelo was there, designing the tomb of Julius II. Raphael painted his luminous frescoes for the stanze. They were younger, more in favor. Leonardo, past 60, was respected but largely ignored. Still he worked quietly. He drew intricate cross-sections of the brain and skull, designs for mechanical gears fossils found in mountain rock, seashells, and fish bones high above the sea. He concluded that the earth itself had changed over ages, that these hills were once ocean floor. It was a daring idea for his age, quietly revolutionary. Then, in 1516, a new door opened. King Francis I of France, young and brilliant, had long admired Leonardo's genius. When he conquered Milan and learned that the old master was in Rome, he invited him to France as premier painter, engineer, and architect to the king. Francis promised him a house, a stipend, and freedom from demands. Leonardo accepted. He was 64 years old, weary of Italian intrigues, but still eager to dream. He crossed the Alps with his faithful student and companion, Francesco Melzi, and a small retinue. Among the luggage were 3 paintings he loved most: Saint John the Baptist, the Virgin and Child with Saint Anne, and the mysterious Mona Lisa. He carried also trunks of notebooks, sketches, and models. The journey was slow, over snow and stone, but the air of freedom revived him. He reached the town of Amboise in the Loire Valley, where King Francis gave him the manor of Clos-Lucé, a modest house connected by an underground passage to the royal chateau. The king often visited him there, calling him Mon Père, my father. In France, Leonardo found the peace that had eluded him for decades. stages, and stars descended from painted skies. He still sketched daily studies of plants, water, and machinery, but his right hand had grown weak, likely from paralysis or stroke. He learned to draw more with his left. Melzi copied his notes and cared for him with devotion. Visitors described an old man with flowing white beard and clear, gentle eyes. He dressed simply in long robes of linen and gray wool. He loved conversation about philosophy, the nature of light, the proportion of the human body. The king delighted in his talk and often sat with him for hours, listening to reflections on art and science, on God and the stars. To Francis he said that painting was a thing of the spirit, born from the eye and the heart together. And Clolis, Leonardo organized his papers, grouping his drawings by subject: anatomy, hydraulics, flight, mechanics, geometry. He intended to leave them in order for publication, but the task was immense. He filled page after page with observations, written in small, mirrored script. He reflected on his failures with calm humor, noting that every experiment teaches, even when it breaks. He wrote, "Experience never errs. It is only our judgment that errs in promising itself results which are not caused by our experiments." His humility He watched birds rising from the Loire at dawn and traced their wing beats in the air with his hand. He imagined machines suspended by propellers or driven by twisted cords. He designed a flying device shaped like a dragonfly, its wings to be powered by levers and pedals. He drew the wind as if it were visible, a pattern of curves and spirals filling the page. Even in his final years, he remained convinced that one day humans would soar through the sky. He wrote simply, "Once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward." As age advanced, his handwriting grew slower, his reflections more meditative. He looked back on his life with gratitude and a quiet sense of incompleteness. He wrote, "As a well-spent day brings happy sleep, so a well-used life brings happy death." He saw time itself as the ultimate work of art, every moment a brushstroke in a design too large to finish. In the spring of 1519, Leonardo's health declined. He spent his days dictating letters and arranging his affairs. He named Francesco Melzi his heir, leaving him the manuscripts, instruments, and drawings that filled his house. He thanked the servants who had cared for him and requested that small alms be given to the poor of Amboise. According to tradition, King Francis visited often, speaking softly with the old master. Some later chroniclers imagined that the king held Leonardo in his arms as he died. sketches lay scattered, wings, faces, machines, the shapes of clouds. He left the world as he had lived in it, surrounded by wonder. He was buried in the chapel of Saint Florentin at the Chateau d'Amboise. The chapel was later destroyed during wars, and his remains were lost, though a modest tomb nearby now bears his name. People still leave flowers there, as if to thank him for teaching the world to look. After his death, Melzi spent years preserving his papers. He bound them into volumes and tried to keep them together. But over centuries, the pages scattered across Europe. Today, some rest in Milan, some in Madrid, some in London, and a few precious sheets in private collections. Together, they reveal the vast map of a mind that refused boundaries. In them are designs for a lot. In the mind of Ilz, a mind puzzled clearly of a vast art designs for bridges, studies of the human skull, notes on fossils, calculations of flight, jokes, fables, and quiet reflections. He wrote that nature is full of infinite causes that never cease to produce new effects. He believed curiosity was a form of love. His influence spread slowly but endlessly. Artists learned from his subtle transitions of tone. Engineers from his precision of observation. Scientists from his patience in recording his signature, and so, long after his body returned to dust, Leonardo da Vinci lived on in the motion of thought itself. He had once written, "Human subtlety will never devise an invention more beautiful, nor more simple, nor more direct than does nature." He meant that to understand the world was to admire it. Every painting, every calculation, every machine was an act of reverence. Imagine him one final time standing at the window of Clothes in the evening. The garden hums with summer insects. The light fades to gold, and then to blue. He leans on the sill, his old hands folded, and watches swallows curve across the sky. Perhaps he thinks of the hills of Vinci, where he was born, of the water wheels he built as a child, of Florence and Milan, of the faces he painted, and the questions he never solved. The air is still. A page lies open on the table behind him, ink drying on a final line. Everything connects. Centuries later, travelers in Tuscany stand before his birthplace, a simple farmhouse among olive trees, and listen to the wind moving through the grass. They cannot hear his voice, but they feel its echo in every motion of the landscape. Each ripple on the stream, each glint of light on a leaf, seems to whisper his name. The same air he studied still carries the scent of earth and rain. The same stars he charted as